The night Ethan Caldwell told his pregnant wife to sleep in the doghouse, the wind coming off the Hudson River cut through the estate like a blade. It was late October in Westchester County, the kind of cold that settled into bone, the kind that did not care about apologies or explanations. The lights in the master bedroom burned warm and golden, curtains half open, shadows moving against the glass. Inside, music played softly. Laughter drifted down from the second-floor balcony, careless and unrestrained. Outside, near the edge of the manicured lawn, Claire Caldwell stood barefoot on the stone patio, her hands wrapped around a thin cotton robe that barely covered her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant, trembling, not from fear, but from something colder and heavier. The structure in front of her had once belonged to their German shepherd, Duke, before the dog died, and before Ethan decided the doghouse could serve another purpose. He stood a few feet away from her, arms crossed, irritation carved into his face as if this were an inconvenience rather than an act of cruelty. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His calm carried authority. "You wanted space," he said. "This is space." Claire looked past him, toward the house she had lived in for 6 years, the home she had furnished, cleaned, defended. She could hear the woman upstairs again, the soft laugh that did not belong to her. Madison Reed, 24 years old, long hair, new teeth, always smiling when she thought someone important was watching. From the balcony, Madison leaned over the railing, phone raised, filming. "This is wild," she said, laughing. "I have never seen anything like this." Claire did not respond. She did not cry. That absence of reaction annoyed Ethan more than tears ever would have. He stepped closer, lowered his voice, and reminded her who controlled everything that mattered. "You will sleep there tonight," he said, "and tomorrow we will talk like adults." That word again, adults, as if pregnancy reduced her to a problem rather than a person. The doghouse smelled like damp wood and old straw. Claire knelt slowly, one hand braced against the cold ground as her body adjusted to the movement. The baby kicked, sharp and insistent, reacting to the drop in temperature. She pressed her palm against her stomach, breathing through it, steadying herself. The door creaked as she opened it and crawled inside, folding herself into the space with careful precision. From above, Madison laughed again. The sound carried across the lawn, light and careless, the laugh of someone who believed consequences were optional. Ethan watched for a moment longer, then turned back toward the house. He did not look back. The door closed behind him. Locks clicked. Music rose slightly in volume. Claire sat in the darkness, knees drawn close, back against the thin wooden wall. The cold seeped in immediately. Her phone vibrated in her hand. Not a message from Ethan. Not an apology. A confirmation. She did not smile. 6 months earlier, she had noticed the changes. Not the obvious ones first. Not the late nights or the unfamiliar perfume. It had started with numbers. Minor discrepancies in quarterly reports that Ethan never expected her to read. He liked telling people his wife did not understand business. It made him feel larger. She understood it perfectly. That night, as the cold pressed in around her, she remembered the first flash of doubt she had felt when she realized how leveraged his empire really was. How thin the margins were beneath the surface confidence. How much of his success relied on refinancing and short-term optimism rather than ownership. The memory passed quickly. This was not the time for reflection. Her phone vibrated again. Another confirmation. Documents filed. Time stamped. Finalized. Inside the house, Ethan poured a drink and handed another to Madison. She wandered the bedroom like it already belonged to her, setting her purse on the dresser, slipping out of her heels, admiring herself in the mirror. She asked him what would happen next. "She will calm down," he said. "They always do." That certainty, that arrogance, settled comfortably in his voice. It had always been there. It was what drew investors to him, what convinced people he was untouchable. He believed silence meant submission. He believed restraint meant weakness. Outside, Claire adjusted the thin blanket around her shoulders and closed her eyes. She remembered a different night, years earlier, standing on the rooftop of Ethan's first development in Brooklyn, city lights stretched out behind them. He had taken her hand and promised partnership, equality, protection. He had said he would never embarrass her. He had said family came first. The memory did not hurt anymore. It felt instructional. The baby shifted again. Claire whispered softly, a promise meant only for the child she carried. A promise that this would be the last night she ever accepted humiliation disguised as authority. Her phone buzzed once more. This time, a single line from her attorney. Everything is ready for morning. Claire stared at the words, letting the weight of them settle. She did not respond. There was nothing left to say. The cold deepened as the hours passed. Somewhere near dawn, the music upstairs stopped. Lights went out. The house fell silent. Claire remained awake. By the time the first pale light crept over the lawn, she had already memorized the sounds of the estate. The way the wind moved through the trees. The distant hum of early traffic. The faint click of heating systems coming back to life inside a house she no longer needed permission to enter. At exactly 6:14 in the morning, her phone vibrated again. Process servers dispatched. She exhaled slowly, carefully, as if controlling her breathing controlled the world itself. Inside the house, Ethan slept beside Madison, unaware that the foundations of everything he believed he owned had already shifted. That the morning would not ask for his consent. That silence, when paired with patience, had always been more dangerous than noise. Claire pushed the door of the doghouse open and stepped into the early light, barefoot on the cold stone, spine straight, hand steady against her belly. The day had begun. At 6:34, the first scream cut through the estate like a siren. It came from inside the main house, high and frantic, the sound of someone who had lived too long believing doors only opened for them. Claire heard it clearly from the back lawn. The sound carried over the hedges, across the stone patio, through the bare trees that lined the driveway. A second later came a deeper voice, Ethan's voice, sharp with disbelief, barking questions into the quiet morning as if volume could reverse reality. Claire stayed still. Her robe hung loose around her shoulders. Her feet were numb from the cold. Her hair was slightly damp at the edges from mist. She looked exactly like the woman they thought they had broken. That was the point. If she showed too much strength too early, it would soften the collapse. A car door shut somewhere out front. Then another. Voices followed, professional and clipped, carrying folders and envelopes, moving with the calm confidence of people who did not care who owned the mansion yesterday. Claire's phone vibrated again. Delivered. She did not answer. She simply watched the kitchen windows from where she stood near the doghouse, the same place they had tried to reduce her to a joke. Inside, chaos multiplied. Patricia Caldwell's voice was now unmistakable, shrill and outraged, demanding names, demanding explanations, demanding someone fix this. Patricia lived in a gated community in Greenwich for most of the year, but she treated this Westchester estate like a throne. She had spent decades acting like the Caldwell name was carved into the country itself. She was the kind of woman who spoke to staff without looking at them, who believed respect was something you deserved based on birth, not behavior. Her voice rose again. This has to be a mistake. Ethan's response was lower, tighter. No one does this to me. No one. Claire watched a figure rush past the breakfast room window. A maid. Then a security guard. Then a man in a suit holding papers, moving like he had done this 1,000 times before. It was almost beautiful. Not in a romantic way. In the way a trap is beautiful when it finally closes. Upstairs, a curtain moved. Madison appeared at the master bedroom window, bare shoulder visible, hair messy, confusion on her face. She looked down at the front yard, at the unfamiliar cars, at Ethan pacing in his sleep pants with a phone pressed to his ear. She did not see Claire yet. Or maybe she did and pretended she did not, because mistresses always pretend the wife is the problem, not the mirror. Madison raised her phone anyway. Not filming now. Calling. Her lips moved. Probably checking her options. Probably calling the man who always promised her he was untouchable. Claire's baby kicked, slow and heavy. She pressed her palm to her belly. Easy, she thought. Not yet. The front doors opened. Patricia stormed onto the terrace in a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's rent, foreclosure notice in her hand, shaking it like an insult. Ethan followed, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched, phone still in his hand as he listened to someone on the other end explain something he did not like. Then he saw Claire. He stopped mid-step, annoyance crossing his face like a shadow. In his mind, she was still the smallest problem in the room. That arrogance would be his final mistake. Patricia turned too, and her face twisted instantly. Rage, not fear. The kind of rage that comes when your world cracks, and you need someone beneath you to blame. So you're still here? Patricia snapped. Standing there like you belong. Ethan waved a hand at Claire without looking at her fully, like she was staff. Go inside through the back, he said. Stay out of the way. We're handling something. Handling something. Claire did not move. Ethan finally looked at her directly, irritated at her stillness. Claire. Now. Madison stepped onto the terrace behind them, wrapped in one of Claire's robes, the kind of small theft that always made mistresses feel powerful. She leaned against the doorframe like she owned the view, like she had earned the house through nothing but a smile. What is going on? Madison asked, voice light, almost bored. Is this like some audit thing? Patricia glared at Ethan. Tell her to go back upstairs. This is family business. Ethan swallowed, eyes scanning the papers again. His fingers were shaking slightly now, and he hated that. He hated the feeling of not controlling the next sentence. There are notices on the front door, he said, and on the gate, and on the office building. They're saying the properties are in default. In default. Patricia repeated, like the words were offensive. That's impossible. We have assets. Ethan's laugh was sharp. We have leverage. That's different. Claire's expression did not change. She had lived with that truth for months. She had watched Ethan refinance and refinance, watched him brag at dinners in Manhattan while quietly stacking debt behind the scenes. She had watched him act like a king while balancing on glass. Patricia's voice sharpened. Who is doing this to us? Ethan stared at the name on the paperwork like he could burn it away. Meridian Ridge Holdings. It sounded harmless. Generic. The kind of entity people ignore because they assume it belongs to someone else. Ethan's eyes narrowed, mind racing, trying to locate an enemy worthy of this. A rival developer. A hostile investor. A disgruntled lender. Not his wife. Never his wife. Claire took one slow step forward, barefoot on stone, robe trailing. She looked like a woman coming in from cold, not a woman about to dismantle an empire. That contrast was deliberate. Patricia pointed at her again, desperate to keep power somewhere. She did something. I know she did. She's been bitter for months. She probably called her little friends. Ethan snapped. Claire doesn't have friends like that. The contempt in his voice was casual, effortless. The same contempt he used when he told people she did not understand business. That she was emotional. That she was lucky. Claire finally spoke, soft and steady. You're right, she said. I didn't call friends. Ethan frowned. Patricia went still. Madison's eyes narrowed, sensing a shift. Claire continued, voice calm enough to make it sound like she was talking about weather. I called attorneys. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. What are you talking about? Patricia scoffed. Do not play games. You slept in a doghouse. You are not in a position to threaten anyone. Claire turned her eyes to Patricia. Not angry, not pleading, just looking at her the way you look at someone who has not yet realized they are already late. Then Claire's phone buzzed again. She did not glance down. She already knew what it would say. The bank freeze phase had begun. Ethan's phone suddenly rang with a different tone. A direct line. He answered immediately. What do you mean the accounts are locked? He demanded. He listened. His face drained fast. The color pulled back like a tide. Patricia stepped closer, panic now slicing through her rage. Ethan, what is it? He did not answer her. He was too busy trying to bully reality into submission. There has to be an error, Ethan said into the phone. Release the hold. I'm Ethan Caldwell. Pause. Then the last bit of his confidence cracked. He whispered, I can fix this. Claire watched him like a scientist watching a reaction in real time. Madison shifted backward without meaning to, her hand tightening on the robe collar. She was beginning to understand that wealth was not a person. It was a system, and systems could be taken. Patricia grabbed Ethan's arm. Call the lawyers. Call everyone. Ethan's laugh was hollow. They're not answering. Claire's baby kicked again, harder, like a reminder that this was not only about humiliation. It was about legacy. It was about what kind of world her child would be born into. A memory flashed through Claire's mind, sharp and quick, and it came exactly when it needed to. Not the rooftop proposal. Not romance. Something colder. Ethan at a charity gala in Midtown, smiling as he introduced Claire to donors and called her my calm little wife, like she was a pet. Patricia laughing beside him, eyes scanning the room for more important people, never once looking at Claire like she was human. Claire's flashback ended as quickly as it came, leaving the present sharper. This was not sudden. This was accumulated. Ethan stared at the foreclosure notice again, breathing faster, and Claire saw it. The moment his mind finally brushed the edge of the impossible. He looked at her. Really looked. Claire, he said, slower now. What did you do? Claire took another step forward. She did not reveal everything yet. Not all at once. The reveal had to land like a controlled detonation, not a messy confession. She simply said, I made sure this morning would happen. And for the first time, the terrace went quiet. Not because they understood, because they feared they were about to. Ethan had always believed that control revealed itself through volume, through commands, through the ability to make other people move first. That belief began dying the moment Claire did not answer his question. He took a step toward her, then stopped. Something in her posture had changed. She was no longer bracing herself against the cold or the moment. She was standing the way she used to stand in boardrooms when she thought no one was watching. Balanced. Certain. Still. What did you do? He repeated, louder this time, as if repetition could force clarity. Claire let the silence stretch. She did not owe him speed. Speed belonged to people trying to escape. Behind him, Patricia began talking again, her voice climbing in pitch as panic took root. She talked about mistakes, about lawsuits, about how no one would dare touch the Caldwell name. She talked the way people talk when they are trying to keep their past alive through words. Madison said nothing. She had stepped closer to the doorway without realizing it, positioning herself near the exit. Her instincts were excellent. Her loyalty was not. Claire finally spoke. I bought it. The words were soft, almost gentle. Ethan frowned. Bought what? Claire did not raise her voice. She did not list assets. She did not explain yet. She tilted her head slightly and looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who skipped too many classes. All of it, she said. The sentence landed badly. It did not explode. It confused. Confusion was worse. Patricia laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Do not be ridiculous. You cannot even access our accounts. That is correct, Claire said. You cannot. Ethan's breath came shallow now. He looked down at the paperwork again, then back at Claire. The name on the documents glared up at him. Meridian Ridge Holdings. He had assumed it was a hostile firm. A faceless enemy he could eventually negotiate with. Not a person who had shared his bed. When, he asked. 6 months ago, Claire said. Patricia's laughter stopped. Ethan felt the world tilt slightly. 6 months was not impulsive. 6 months was methodical. 6 months meant intent. A flash of memory cut through him without permission. Claire sitting quietly at the kitchen table at night, reading on her tablet while he took calls upstairs. Claire attending dinners and saying very little. Claire watching him argue about refinancing terms with bankers in Manhattan. asking one question that he brushed off as naive. At the time, he had enjoyed the imbalance. It made him feel important. Now that same imbalance was rearranging itself. "You don't have that kind of money," he said, too quickly. "You never did." Claire smiled then. Not cruel, not triumphant, just factual. "That's where you were wrong," she said. Patricia stepped forward, her composure cracking at last. "You married into this family," she snapped. "You didn't bring anything." Claire turned to her slowly. "No," she said. "I married someone who needed me to believe that." Madison inhaled sharply. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it, then back at Ethan. Whatever fantasy she had built around him was collapsing faster than expected. Ethan shook his head, backing away like the terrace itself had betrayed him. "This doesn't make sense. I would have known." Claire's voice stayed level. "You never looked." The sentence cut deeper than accusation. She did not reveal everything yet. The architecture of collapse required pacing. First disbelief, then fear, then understanding, only then regret. Claire reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out her phone. She did not thrust it forward. She did not wave it like proof. She simply unlocked it and held it where Ethan could see. Wire transfers, property acquisitions, loan purchases, dates, numbers, names that meant nothing to Madison or Patricia, but everything to Ethan. His mouth opened slightly. He did not speak. A flashback struck now, sharp and unavoidable. Ethan at a dinner in Tribeca, joking with investors about marrying a woman who did not ask questions. Laughter around the table. Pride in his voice. The satisfaction of being underestimated by someone he believed was beneath him. The memory collapsed under the weight of the present. Patricia staggered back and sat heavily on the terrace chair, robe slipping, foreclosure notice crushed in her hand. "This is extortion," she whispered. "This is illegal." Claire shook her head once. "It is not." She began explaining then, but not emotionally. Clinically, like someone reciting facts they had already accepted, she spoke about purchasing debt rather than properties, about blind trusts, about refinancing vulnerabilities Ethan had ignored because success had made him reckless. She spoke about how his empire had looked impressive from the outside while being hollowed out quietly from within. Ethan listened in fragments. He heard numbers, percentages. He heard the phrase controlling interest and felt something inside him give way. Madison stepped back another inch. "So what?" Ethan said finally, desperation creeping into his tone. "You ruin us because you're angry." Claire met his eyes. "I didn't do this because I was angry," she said. "I did it because you were careless." That distinction mattered. Patricia stood suddenly, rage flaring again. "You are destroying your own family." Claire did not look at her. "I am protecting my child," she said, "from men who confuse dominance with entitlement." Madison finally spoke. "Ethan," she said, voice tight, "you didn't tell me any of this." Ethan did not answer her. He could not look at her without seeing another miscalculation. Madison took another step toward the door. Claire noticed. She said nothing. Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time he did not answer. He already knew what it would be. Confirmation of the freeze. Confirmation of the repossessions beginning. Confirmation that this was no longer a misunderstanding. He sank into the chair opposite his mother, suddenly looking older, smaller. The posture of a man realizing that confidence had been the only asset he truly owned. "Claire," he said, quieter now, "we can talk about this." She nodded once. "We are." The baby moved again, slow and heavy, grounding her. "This is not revenge," Claire continued. "Revenge is impulsive. This is consequence." Patricia began crying then, sharp sobs that came without dignity. She reached for Claire's arm, fingers shaking. "For the baby," she said. "Please." Claire looked at the hand on her sleeve, then gently removed it. "You should have thought of that last night," she said. Madison was already inside, heels in hand, moving fast. She did not look back. Claire watched her go, noting the speed with which loyalty dissolved when money did. Ethan followed Madison with his eyes until she disappeared, then turned back to Claire, something like understanding finally settling in. "You planned this," he said. "While I thought you were quiet." Claire's gaze was steady. "Yes," she said. "I was quiet." She paused, letting the words sink. That is not the same thing as powerless. And for the first time since dawn, Ethan said nothing at all. The movers arrived just after 8. They did not rush. They never rushed. They moved with the practiced calm of people who had done this before, who understood that panic belonged to the displaced, not the executors. 2 trucks idled at the front gate, engines humming softly, logos clean and unremarkable. A third vehicle followed carrying a locksmith. Ethan watched from the terrace as if the scene might dissolve if he stared hard enough. It did not. Every sound felt amplified now. The crunch of gravel under boots, the quiet click of clipboards opening, the low voices exchanging confirmations. Patricia sat rigid in her chair, eyes glassy, hands folded in her lap like she was attending a funeral and still unsure who had died. Claire stood a few steps away from them, the morning sun finally warming the stone beneath her feet. She had changed robes. This one was heavier, darker. The baby shifted again, steady and strong. She rested her hand on her belly, grounding herself in the weight of reality. Ethan's phone vibrated continuously in his pocket. Lawyers, bankers, people who had once answered him on the first ring. Now they called to tell him what he could not change. "This is insane," he muttered. "They can't just take everything." "They can," Claire said. "They already have." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The truth was loud enough. The locksmith approached, polite but firm, and explained that access codes would be changed within the hour. That certain areas of the property would be restricted immediately. That keys would no longer function. Patricia finally stood, trembling. "This is my home," she said. "I have lived here for years." The locksmith nodded sympathetically. "I understand, ma'am. But the ownership changed yesterday afternoon." Ownership. The word hit differently now. Not as a concept. As a verdict. Ethan looked at Claire again, searching her face for something he could use. Anger. Hesitation. Regret. He found none. "Why humiliate us like this?" he asked. "Why not just leave?" Claire turned to him slowly. "You didn't leave me a choice," she said. A flashback surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Ethan standing in the doorway the night before, arms crossed, telling her to sleep outside. His voice calm, assured, certain she would comply because she always had. The memory snapped back into the present, colliding with the sight of movers carrying furniture through the front doors. "This isn't about humiliation," Claire continued. "It's about accuracy." Madison emerged briefly from the house then, dragging a suitcase behind her. Her eyes were hidden behind oversized sunglasses. She did not look at Claire. She did not look at Ethan either. She walked straight past him, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and urgent. "I need a car," she said into the phone. "Now." She did not say goodbye. Ethan watched her leave, something hollow opening in his chest as he realized the sequence of losses was accelerating. Power, money, respect, loyalty. Patricia noticed too. Her mouth tightened, bitterness replacing shock. "She used you," she said to Ethan, as if that explained everything. Claire met Patricia's gaze. "She followed the example you set," she said. "You taught her what mattered." Patricia flinched. A bank representative arrived next, briefcase in hand, and explained the status of the accounts with practiced neutrality. Funds frozen. Lines of credit suspended. Reviews pending. Ethan listened, nodding numbly, absorbing each sentence like a physical blow. "This doesn't have to be permanent," he said suddenly, turning back to Claire. "You've made your point." Claire considered him for a moment. This was the moment where most people expected mercy. The moment where power holders tried to negotiate once they felt it slipping. The moment where anger softened into pleading. Claire did not take it. "I didn't do this to make a point," she said. "I did it to end something." Ethan swallowed. "End what?" "The illusion," she said, "that you were entitled to decide who mattered." The movers carried past them now, loading furniture onto trucks. A painting Ethan loved disappeared through the door. A sculpture Patricia had bragged about vanished next. Patricia's composure cracked fully then. She sank back into the chair, sobbing openly, no longer trying to control the image. "I built this family," she cried. "I sacrificed." Claire's voice softened slightly, but not enough to change the outcome. "You protected power," she said, "not people." That distinction mattered. Ethan's shoulders sagged. He looked smaller now, like the weight of his own decisions had finally settled on him. "What happens next?" he asked. Claire took a breath. "Next," she said, "you leave." Silence followed. Heavy. Absolute. "You have 72 hours," she continued. "The legal minimum. After that, everything remaining is repossessed." Patricia stared at her in disbelief. "You can't throw us out." Claire met her eyes calmly. "You threw my luggage onto the lawn," she said. "This is proportional." The baby kicked again, a reminder that this was not abstract, that consequences moved forward through generations. A brief flashback flickered through Claire's mind then. Patricia standing in the driveway weeks earlier, screaming, humiliating, making sure neighbors could hear. Claire standing silent, already calculating. The memory faded as quickly as it came. Ethan stood, suddenly desperate. "Claire," he said, stepping closer. "I loved you." She did not flinch. "You loved what you thought I was," she said. "That's not the same thing." He reached for her arm instinctively, then stopped himself, hand falling uselessly to his side. The movers closed the back of the first truck. The sound echoed across the lawn like a door slamming shut. Claire turned toward the house, toward the life she had built and the future she would control. She paused only once, looking back at Ethan and Patricia standing among their dismantled world. "This isn't cruelty," she said quietly. "It's closure." She walked away then, each step deliberate, the estate behind her no longer a symbol of humiliation but proof. By the time she reached the front gate, the locks had already been changed. And behind her, for the first time, the Caldwell name meant nothing at all. 3 years later, Ethan Caldwell woke up every morning to the sound of the elevated train rattling past his studio apartment in Queens. The ceiling above his bed had a faint crack that widened slightly every winter, a thin line he stared at longer than he liked to admit. The apartment smelled faintly of reheated coffee and old carpet. No gates, no driveway, no silence, just the city moving whether he wanted it to or not. He worked as a property operations coordinator now. That was the title the firm gave him. It sounded better than assistant, better than manager. It paid $68,000 a year before taxes. Enough to survive, not enough to forget. He wore cheap suits. He took the subway. He answered emails from people half his age who did not know his name carried any history at all. When they spoke to him, they spoke without fear, without deference, without hesitation. That was the part that hurt the most. On Thursdays, he supervised maintenance walkthroughs at mid-rise buildings in Brooklyn and Long Island City. He checked boiler rooms. He filed reports. He nodded when tenants complained. He followed protocols written by people who would never ask his opinion. Sometimes, while standing in an elevator that smelled of cleaning solution and sweat, he would remember the private lifts in his old office building. The way doors opened only for him. The way people waited for him to speak first. The contrast was not subtle. It was surgical. Patricia Caldwell lived in a subsidized senior residence in New Jersey now. The kind of place that required financial disclosures and medical forms. The kind of place that did not care about legacy. Her apartment had beige walls, second-hand furniture, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot. She complained constantly to the staff about the food, about the noise, about the disrespect. They listened politely. They did not change anything. She spent most afternoons watching daytime television, volume too loud, remote clutched like authority. Every so often she told anyone who would listen that she had once owned a mansion in Westchester, that her son had been someone important. People smiled and nodded the way you nod at stories that no longer mattered. Claire never visited. She had set up a modest trust to cover Patricia's basic care. Nothing more. No luxuries. No influence. Just survival. Not mercy. Balance. Patricia wrote letters at first. Long ones. Defensive ones. Letters that tried to rewrite the past into misunderstandings and intentions. Claire read them once, then filed them away. Silence was still the most accurate response. Madison Reed moved on quickly. She always did. She attached herself to a tech entrepreneur in San Francisco less than a month after leaving Westchester. He posted pictures. She smiled in them. The captions were aspirational. The comments, less kind. People remembered. Screenshots survived longer than promises. Her following shrank. Her invitations slowed. By the end of the second year, she was promoting skincare brands and pretending it was strategy. Claire never interfered. Reputation did its work quietly. Claire lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park now. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Clean lines. No unnecessary ornament. The nursery was flooded with light. Her daughter, Sophie, played on the rug with wooden blocks, stacking and restacking them with determined concentration. Claire watched from the doorway, a cup of tea cooling in her hand. Sophie had Ethan's eyes. She had Claire's calm. Claire's company had grown steadily. She restructured the properties she kept, invested in ethical redevelopment, avoided the leverage traps Ethan had fallen into. Growth was slower, stronger, sustainable. She slept well. On quiet evenings, when Sophie was asleep and the city hummed outside, Claire sometimes thought about the night she slept in the doghouse. Not with anger, with clarity. The cold, the laughter, the assumption that she would endure anything without consequence. Those memories no longer hurt. They instructed. Ethan tried to reach out at first. Emails, then letters, then a voicemail he never finished. Apologies that grew quieter each time. Claire never responded. Forgiveness was not something she withheld out of spite. It was something she delayed until it would no longer cost her anything. Once a month, Ethan saw Sophie under supervision. Neutral locations, libraries, public parks. He brought modest gifts he could barely afford. He smiled too much, tried too hard. Claire watched through glass or from benches nearby, letting Sophie form her own understanding. She would not poison her child with rage. She would not erase the truth either. Power, Claire had learned, was not loud. It did not announce itself. It simply decided. On the third anniversary of the foreclosure, Claire stood in her office, fingers resting on a small framed piece of wood mounted on the wall. A single plank, burnt at the edges. Sophie's newborn handprint pressed into white paint. The last remnant of the doghouse. Claire did not keep it as a trophy. She kept it as calibration. The city lights flickered on outside as evening settled. Claire turned away from the window, toward her daughter's laughter drifting down the hall, and walked forward without looking back. Some lessons did not need repeating. They just needed remembering. The last time Claire drove past the old estate in Westchester, the gate was open. Not broken, not forced. Simply open, like the property had finally accepted that it no longer belonged to anyone who needed to guard it. She slowed the car for a moment, Sophie asleep in the back seat, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of a child who had never known instability. Claire did not stop. She did not turn in. She observed, then continued driving south toward the city, where her life actually existed now. The estate had been converted into something else entirely. Part residential, part nonprofit. The signage near the driveway mentioned transitional housing for women and children. Claire had approved the plan herself, quietly, through layers of management. She had never visited after the renovation was completed. She did not need to. Some spaces were reclaimed best by absence. That night, back in Manhattan, Claire tucked Sophie into bed and sat beside her until sleep came easily. There were no raised voices in this home. No slammed doors. No laughter that cut instead of comforted. Only quiet, deliberate routines built around safety and consistency. When Sophie stirred and asked for water, Claire brought it without irritation. When Sophie asked why some people yelled and others didn't, Claire answered carefully. Because some people think power is loud, she said, and others learn it doesn't have to be. Sophie nodded, satisfied, and drifted back to sleep. Later, Claire stood alone by the window, city lights stretching endlessly beneath her. She thought about how close everything had come to breaking her once. How easily she could have accepted humiliation as the price of stability. How many nights she had stayed silent while the world assumed silence meant surrender. The truth was quieter. Silence had been preparation. Ethan Caldwell lived somewhere in Queens still. Claire knew because the monthly supervised visitation paperwork required addresses. He had stopped writing letters, stopped apologizing, not because he had healed, but because he had finally understood something he never grasped when he was powerful. That some consequences did not ask for forgiveness. Patricia passed away the previous winter. The notice came through an administrator. Cause natural. Services small. No estate to settle. No assets to divide. Claire acknowledged the message, arranged final expenses through the trust, and closed the file. She felt nothing sharp. Only completion. Madison Reed's name surfaced occasionally in online spaces, attached to short-lived ventures and new faces. Claire did not click. Curiosity no longer served her. The doghouse existed now only as memory. The structure itself had been burned years ago, reduced to ash behind the estate before construction began. Claire had watched the smoke rise alone that morning, not with satisfaction, but with resolve. She had promised herself that day that her daughter would never confuse endurance with virtue. The world continued to test that promise. There were meetings, power plays, men who mistook her calm for permission. She handled them the same way she always had. By listening, by waiting, by acting only when action was final. When Sophie asked one evening why her mother worked so much, Claire smiled and answered honestly. So you won't ever have to, she said. And so you'll never think kindness means weakness. Sophie accepted that as children accept truth when it is delivered without fear. Years from now, when Sophie would ask about her father, Claire would tell her the truth without venom. She would explain choices and consequences. She would explain that love did not survive without respect, and that power without character always collapsed eventually. She would not frame herself as a hero. She would frame herself as someone who refused to stay small when someone else tried to make her smaller. As the night deepened, Claire turned off the lights and prepared for sleep. She did not check her phone. She did not look backward. Her life no longer required vigilance. The person who had once slept in a doghouse now owned everything she needed. Not property, not wealth, control. And somewhere beneath the quiet of the city, beneath the endless motion of people chasing illusions, the final lesson settled into place, complete and immovable. Cruelty always creates mathematics. Silence does not mean surrender. And the person you humiliate today may already own your tomorrow. Claire closed her eyes. The past finally finished with her and rested in a future that no longer needed revenge to feel whole.